So, well, hello, welcome everybody. It's really delightful to see so many people here tonight, and to change this to speaker view. My name's Christian McNeil, and I run a Facebook group called Three Principles Conversations, which has at least one conversation a month, but they've been a bit more frequent recently. I'm delighted to welcome you here tonight. I'll say tonight in our time at 6 o'clock in Glasgow, where I am. I'm really delighted to welcome you here tonight, Joe. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I also appreciate just the wisdom and mentoring that I have received from you over the years. And I'm always touched. We have done a number of things before, but I'm always touched because I first came across you long before I met you in person, shortly after, I think it was your first book, The Serenity Principle, came out. And it really was an enormously helpful book to me in my early recovery from alcoholism. And I mean, it's more than 30 years now. So it was so extraordinary for me to meet this legend in my experience in the flesh when you came over here. And it's been wonderful to get to know you over the past few years. The original, as you mentioned in our pre-recorded talk, the original intention of this call was to talk about the first Three Principles Conference on Addiction, which you've been instrumental in setting up. In fact, it was your idea and your baby. And of course, that, like everything else, has been postponed because of the current crisis. So we've changed the title to to what I can't remember. We've changed the title to talk about
thriving in a world addicted to fear.
Thank you. And that was also the theme of one of your later books, Fear Proof Your Life, which I've also really enjoyed and would highly recommend. So I am really looking forward to this webinar tonight. I'm delighted to see so many people. We have 30 people on the call at the moment, Joe. I think others may join us. I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself and the subject to whatever extent feels appropriate. And if you're up for it, we would normally open for questions later on when we reach a point that seems right for you. So I'll take my lead from you if that's all right, Joe. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Christian, for that lovely introduction and for your friendship over the years. Those of you who don't know Christian, she's just a really lovely person who's done so much great work in the UK, educating a lot of people and sponsoring a lot of conferences, and just her mentorship of a lot of people in recovery. She's done amazing work to get the understanding that we call the Three Principles Psychology out through the United Kingdom and other parts of Europe. So thank you for all your work. And she's hosted my wife and I at her home before in Scotland. And we've even hiked along the lakes of Lake Killarney, or Loch Lomond.
I think you mean Loch Lomond.
Loch Lomond. And I got to hear Christian sing in her beautiful Scottish brogue on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. So that's a fond memory. But I really, I'm, all of our lives have been turned upside down, since the coronavirus hit. And so one of those consequences of that was that we did have to cancel this conference that a lot of people put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into getting this conference, the first international conference about addictions and the Three Principles, off the ground. But as life would have it, it's been postponed, hopefully till the fall, and we'll let people know about that. But when I found that out, I thought, well, let's just keep this session, and Christian suggested to address, because so many people are, we've all lost our bearings a bit here. I know I have at times. I've felt and experienced fear and anxiety and stock market crashing, and, having to isolate and not see people who I would normally do, or things I would normally, going to the gym, and all these disruptions in our normal life. and as well as just mostly a big fear of the unknown. Where is this headed? What are the implications of this? And so I want to start out by just acknowledging that it's absolutely normal to feel fear and stress in these times, and really at any time in our life. Fear is a human emotion, and it is a built into us as part of our perfect design to help us survive in this physical world. It has a very useful purpose, but because human beings have a sometimes an ability to misuse their thinking and take their fears and put them under a magnifying glass until they've grown exponentially and imagine things that never will happen or have happened, thinking they will happen, to live in a terrorizing ourselves about the unknown. And so I really, my heart just goes out to all of you, to me, to my family, to my grandchildren, to everyone having to go through this, because we're all going through it together. And I don't just mean we in the United States, but we in the world. This is reaching every corner of the planet. So we're all literally being pulled together by the virus in a sense. Maybe not to our liking, but one of the side benefits is that we all have to work together on this. And we all have something to learn, not only at a societal level, but at a very personal level. And that's what I want to address today, is how do we as human beings go through this extraordinarily unprecedented, challenging physical problem, illness, with equanimity and grace, with love and compassion for ourselves and others, with ingenuity and creativity about how to deal with it, rather than huddling in a herd, like herded sheep on a hillside in Scotland, just terrified and pulling in with each other, instead of reaching out to one another and seeing how we can be of service and seeing how we can make a difference, even if it's in a small way, crocheting or sewing protective masks. If you're in the United States, we have a huge shortage of masks, and so many seamstresses have volunteered their time, people who know how to sew and are making these. And there's been so many ways that people have reached out and shown that the real resilience of the human spirit to help one another in a time of crisis and need. So what I want to do in the webinar today is really address, first of all, what is the nature of fear itself, because it does have a purpose, and how do we use that fear in a healthy, positive way, versus using it to destroy our own mental health, to cover up our ability to be resilient, to show empathy, to make clear, wise decisions. So how, by, and this is what my work has been for the last 40 years, is really educating people about the right use of the mind. How do we use this powerful mind that we are a part of, and this powerful ability to think and to create our perceptions, our emotions, and our behavior? How do we use that in a way that is most resilient, most mentally healthy, most loving, most creative in bringing forward a more beautiful reality for all of us to live in? How do we use that? Because every person here on this screen, and I know I can't see all of you, there's a lot more on another screen, but those of you who I can see your faces, all of you were born with this extraordinary built-in design of resilience, of innate health. We call it innate mental health. That has the capacity for new thinking in the moment, in response to any circumstance or situation, any crisis, any virus, any calamity. And I want to begin by telling a little story that I heard when I wrote this first book on fear, which was my last book, Fear Proof Your Life. By the way, here's a copy of Fear Proof Your Life. It's still available. New publisher. Just bought out my old publisher. Publishing industry is changing a lot. But that book was really inspired by the events of 9/11. After 9/11, Mark Chibsky, who's my editor and my mentor on writing and has been my agent, who's on this call, was with me when my book Slowing Down to the Speed of Life came out, and then Slowing Down to the Speed of Love and The Speed Trap, a few other books. But shortly after 9/11, I was in New York City a few months later, and I was amazed at how people had come together. I've been to New York City a lot, and it was usually not the most friendly place on the planet. But at that point, everybody was saying hi, and we're very friendly, and it was a whole different sense that you could see the humanity of the New Yorkers come out in response to that tragedy. It really brought people together and kind of leveled the differences. But I remember one of the stories that came out of 9/11 was, when the planes hit the Twin Towers, everybody was terrified, trying to get down the stairwells of the elevators and jumping out windows, and it was a terrifying thing. And a group of stockbrokers on one of the top floors got in the elevator right away, and they happened to be in there with one of the window cleaners, the window cleaners that hangs on the outside of these big buildings and cleans the windows. And his name is Juan. And he was in that elevator, and when it stopped, the electricity was cut off. It was stopped between floors. They were trapped in a building that was ready to implode. And all the stockbrokers were everybody in that elevator was terrified, and their life was flashing before them, and just really terrified of what was to come and not thinking very clearly. And Juan remained calm in that situation. Number one, he knew that elevator in between floors was just a plaster, and that you could break through it and maybe escape. And so the first thing he did was that he said, we all have to work together here. He had a leadership moment. He became a leader of people who had a much higher pay grade, much higher salary, probably much more educated, but he was the leader in that moment. And he brought that group of men together and said, we have to work together. And he had a couple of tools, and they took turns just breaking through this wall. And over the course of the next 15 minutes, which seemed like hours probably to them, they were able to break through, get out, and go down the stairways, and all their lives were saved. That's a tremendous example to me of the power of fearlessness. When you rise to the occasion in a situation of danger, your resiliency takes over. It gives you clear thinking and right action. You see what's in front of you, and you see a creative solution. So that's the power of a calm mind. When our mind gets quiet, however that happens, in a crisis, through an education of the mind like we're doing here today, when our mind is in that still point, we're connected to a universal, deeper intelligence that we would call wisdom, intuition, insight. It's an intelligence that exists beyond what's in our brain, beyond what's in the known of our thoughts. And this is what we need at a time like this. We need to draw from a well that's far deeper than our personal history or our collective history of what to do in this situation. And that doesn't mean we don't listen to the scientists and the experts. When you're in a situation, you listen to the smartest person in the room, and that, in the case of the elevator, it was the window cleaner, was the smartest person in the room, and that's who they listened to, rather than, well, I know more than you, I have a much bigger salary than you do. Their ego didn't get in the way because they wanted to survive. So common sense came through. So today, what I want to talk about is how fear, number one, is created innocently, how we can throw gasoline on the fire of fear or we can let it die out and pass through our minds so that we can access this resilience, how we can tap into this deeper well of intelligence to better listen to other people, to be empathic towards others, and to draw out the best in other people around us. So we're going to look at what fear is, and when fear falls away, this resilience that remains, how that can help us in this situation that we're in now. Because we have to have the best minds, the greatest intelligence, and the most common sense in all of our collective humanity to deal with this enormous challenge that we face. I think of another story. Stories are always helpful. And this is during another tragedy. A woman that I interviewed for my current book, which is called The Transformation Principle that I'm working on. Her name is Mahima, and Mahima comes from Nepal, lives in Kathmandu. Some of you know Mahima that are here. She's an incredible speaker. She's a young woman in her late 20s. She was in charge of emergency preparedness for the country of Nepal. And Mahima noticed in her training of emergency staff, first responders, relief workers, airline pilots, flight attendants, Chamber of Commerce, medical personnel, educators. Her job was to go in and make sure that in the case of emergency, they knew the protocol and they knew how to follow it. But she found that the thing that always got in the way, that created the most mistakes and created the most deaths, was when people panicked. They froze. All the training that they had had, all the great protocols that they had developed kind of went out the window because fear took over. And she said there's this psychological dimension is really the most important factor, because all the preparation you can have, you never really know in a tragedy. You never really know in a situation like we're in right now with the coronavirus what the right answer is. We're walking into the unknown here. And she knew that. And so she started searching the internet. And one of the things that she ran across was the 3 principles of psychology, one of many things. She looked at all kinds of programs. But something in what she heard in one of the videos that she listened to kind of whirled around in her head for a long time. And it was just a very simple phrase. And it was this: we are living in the feeling of our thinking 100% of the time. We are always living in the feeling of our thinking. And she kind of scratched. That didn't really mean much to her. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she couldn't get it out of her head. And then the earthquake hit. The famous earthquake of, I think, 4 years ago now, approximately, hit Nepal and Kathmandu. And, and of course, it was, over 4,000 people died. Fires started. Treasures that had been around for many, many centuries were destroyed. It was pandemonium. The Indians weren't sending in medical supplies. They got into a political conflict with the Indian government during all of this. And so there was Mahima, like many other people, huddled in her grandparents' house because it was the safest house. It was the largest and most sturdily built. So her cousins and aunts and uncles and nieces and everybody was huddled in there, kind of waiting for the next tremor to hit. And there would be the houses would shake, and they would think, oh, is this going to be the big one? Is this going to be the big one? Because that's always the case with an earthquake. You never know when the biggest one is going to hit. And so you always react with fear as though it is that one. So the adults were huddled around. And meanwhile, to quote Stephen Colbert, meanwhile, the little nieces are playing in the background with their dolls and playing their games and laughing. And to them, this is great. All the adults are home from work and school, and I got my whole family here, and I'm having a good time. And when the tremor would hit, she would get scared too, and she would grab a hold of their legs and hang on. But when it stopped, she would start playing again, while the adults continued thinking about it and imagining the next worst case scenario and talking to each other and what are we going to do and how can we save ourselves, and on and on. And the little girl looks up at them all at some point and she says, "Can't you see? Can't you see it's over?" And in that moment, Mahima heard that sentence. We are living in the feeling of our thinking 100% of the time. And she said, in that moment, I had this revelation, I had this insight. And the insight was this: the earthquake is not creating my fear it is my thoughts about the earthquake that are creating my fear. And in that moment, I calmed down and I saw very clearly how to make a safer, and it changed me. It was a psychological shift for her, a transformation. And she said she realized that it was always her thinking that was creating all of her feelings, all of her emotions, including her fear. And when she saw that, it availed her to see in a real common sense way the right action, the next action. So she thought, everybody needs to know what I just realized. If all the relief workers and all the doctors and all the healthcare workers knew this would change everything. So she got on the internet and contacted Rudy Kennard, who's actually doing another webinar with his wife at this very moment on the same subject at the same time. We coincidentally overlapped each other. And she called Rudy, who happened to be at the Three Principles annual conference in London. And he happened to answer his phone because he saw it was from Nepal. And whoa, what's this? And she said, "Rudy, can you and a team of people come over here and teach the principles to our first responders and our frontline people? We need your help now. Please send people to help us. We need to know what you know about the mind so we can respond to this absolute crisis." And Rudy stood up in the room. He says, "I'm on the phone with someone from Nepal, just had the earthquake. We need to we want to start a GoFund. We need $5,000 to fly us over there." A team of people to go over there. Within 5 minutes, they had all the money. They flew over there. They were over there for about 6 weeks. And many people, including myself and many others, made little video vignettes to send out to the field, to the relief workers, to the teachers, to the doctors, just giving people a simple education of how the mind creates fear and how the mind has access to this innate resilience. And it was quite extraordinary, the difference it made, because the relief workers, because as you can imagine, digging through rubble and unburying dead people or half dead people and trying to save lives is an extremely stressful circumstance. And so relief workers would last at the most 2 weeks in the field. But after they began to learn the principles and how stress is created, fear is created from the inside through the power of the mind and thought, they began to be able to stay out in the field double that time, 4 weeks. And when they came back, their recuperation rate, instead of 2 weeks out of the field, was only 1 week. So it saved an enormous number of lives because time was of the essence, of course, to stay out there at the critical time while people were trapped and unavailable to get medical help. So understanding the power of not throwing gasoline on fear and instead letting it die out so that your resilient thinking can come to the fore is extremely efficient, life-saving, and powerful for survival. So, so that's how are we doing on time? I don't have my there we go. Oh, we're already halfway through. So I'd like to to just stop for a second. And I don't know how you handle questions, Christian. If anyone has a comment at this point, like what would you like answered today in this webinar? What would you hope? And just I'd like maybe 2 or 3 people to hear from you at this point, just to get a sense of the audience. I see some people I haven't seen in a long time, like Bob Rood, others. Does anyone have a question?
And feel free to use chat if you're not the chat box. You can type that in if you're not comfortable being, speaking
Okay,
out,
click the chat box.
or raise a hand. But if you have a question, please just unmute yourself and come in. We'd love to hear from you. Dave from London has raised his hand. So Dave, I'll just unmute you if you give me 1 sec. Right, you're unmuted, Dave.
Great. Thanks, Christian. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
Great to see you, and thanks for doing this talk. It's really wonderful, very, very helpful for everyone, I'm sure. Yeah, my question's really, I've been a long-term fan of all your books, and going back to some of the early ones with Richard Carlson, where you would often speak about the 2 ways we can use our minds, which was the free-flowing mode and the processing mode. That seemed to be quite a big theme in those early books. And I was just wondering, mapping it onto what you're talking about today, and obviously the coronavirus crisis we're in, how would you say those concepts or those ideas of free flowing and processing? Because I often find myself during the day looking at the news and then catching myself, being very in my intellect and looping over the same thinking over and over again. And then when I kind of let it go, and I guess fall back into what you might have been pointing to with the free flowing mode. There's a more sense of ease, and it just feels less intense, the whole situation. So I just wondered if you could speak about that, because obviously it was something that was quite underlined quite heavily in some of the early books that you wrote with Richard.
Sure, David. Yeah.
Thanks.
So my language and how we talk about this and how I talk about it has evolved a lot since then. That was 20 some years ago, and I hope more simplify and deepen what I could see 20 some years ago. The way I see that now, we are thinking beings. We are always thinking. As long as you're alive, whether you're asleep or awake, there's thought happening. Thought is a constant. It's the same as your heart beating, your breathing, flow of blood and through your body, and the electricity through the neurons of your body. We're always thinking. So thinking is a constant. And sometimes that thinking is thinking that is what we might call habitual thinking. Thinking that is stored in memory, in the brain, our habits, our values, our concepts, our self-concepts, our addictive habits, our good learned habits like knowing how to speak English or type on a computer or all of that. And so the function of the brain to remember and store thoughts and information is extremely helpful. We call that the intellect. We have an intellectual mind, what David, you referred to as the analytical or processing mode. And then we have thought that seemingly comes from out of the blue. It's new thought, insight, creativity, a whole new way of seeing something, a new invention. When I'm speaking to you now, I'm not speaking from memory, although I'm drawing from a lot of memory. I'm speaking from more of a flow. I'm just wanting to help you. I'm wanting to pass on. And so I'm just kind of getting myself out of the way in a sense. What should I say? How should I say it? All that self-conscious kind of is like driving with the parking brake on. But that still happens to me. But because I can have this power of consciousness, it's another principle, is one of the 3 principles, is consciousness, that I have the capacity to be aware that I'm thinking in this moment, and that my experience is coming from my thinking in this moment. That self-awareness allows us to, in a sense, have um, wisdom and discernment, whether I'm operating from a habitual past thought pattern or if I'm operating from something that is really wise and appropriate and right on in this moment, something that's useful. So when the other day I don't know, I watched way too much cable news before I went to bed, like some of you may have done that during this crisis. And I had so many nightmares that night. I was drowning in one of them and being pulled down under by the current and gasping. And I came out of this deep sleep with this, my, I was in a pool of sweat. I was just, really feeling my thinking big time. But of course I was having a nightmare. And when I woke up, I realized, of course, this was a nightmare. It didn't really happen. But my heart rate was still beating fast and I was still feeling the hangover of that nightmare. And so I went about my day, and every now and then I would have the thought, oh God, am I feeling what's going on in the world? Or, what's it? And I would kind of start analyzing my thinking intellectually. And eventually it dawned on me, just like Mahima said, I was feeling my thinking. That's all it was. I was just caught up in thought innocently, understandably. I wasn't judging it myself or having it. And you have no idea how valuable that is, to still be a human being with all the positive and negative emotions that we have as humans. But to know that where your or my experience is coming from in any given moment isn't from what I'm thinking about, but from the fact that I'm thinking about it in the way I'm thinking about it. That's like waking up from a daymare, a nightmare during the awake state of consciousness, and seeing the truth or the untruth of that thinking. That, just that, noticing that, and it's not an analytical thing. You're not analyzing your thinking. You're not trying to change your thinking or get rid of your thinking or do anything with your thinking. It's simply waking up from the nightmare of daytime thinking. And in that moment of awareness, something happens. It calms us down. It gives us relief. We get back to that natural state of mental health, of well-being, sometimes quickly, sometimes gradually, but we will eventually settle into what I would call the true essence of our being. And from there, we have a new perspective, a wiser perspective, a more empathic, compassionate perspective for ourselves first and for others. And from that perspective, we are able to deal with whatever life gives us. So the principles of mind being the source of all experience, it's a power, thought, a constant that's always happening, sometimes habitual thinking, sometimes insightful, wise thinking. And consciousness, the principle that brings all of that to life, is a sensory, emotional, perceptual experience. Those are the constants. Those are like, some of you are listening to this are from Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have a huge wilderness area called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area. And when you go to the Boundary Waters, you're usually going to someplace you've never been before. And so you go to an outfitter and they give you a map of the area you're going to and show you where the campsites are. And they give you a compass. And you hopefully know how to use the compass and how to navigate and how to paddle the canoe. But you don't really know where you're going. But you have a little bit of a clue with the map and the compass. The principles are like that map and that compass. They never give us an exact replica of reality. They give us a best guess. And when we get to the next point that we can see the points after that from, then we have a better idea of where we're going. But the map never tells us about the weather, if we're going to get rained on, or a bear is going to steal our food, or there's all kinds of unknowns, but it makes going into the unknown doable. So we're always going into this unknown wilderness of this reality, and the reality of the pandemic that we're faced right now. We don't know when we're going to go back to work. We don't know if our kids are going to have graduation or get to go to that senior prom. If we're going to get our money back from paying for the dorm last semester that they didn't get to use. We don't know if our 401k is ever going to come back. We don't know what's going to happen to the economy. We don't know if we'll survive or if we'll know someone that dies. There's so much we don't know. But when we know we have something that we can absolutely count on 100% to guide us into the unknown, and know that we will have insight when we get to the present moment in the future, that we will have this built-in extraordinary intelligence of wisdom to guide us to the next step. And knowing that, just knowing that, helps us settle down. Knowing that stops us from being the quivering herd of sheep huddled to protect ourselves, but frozen in fear, to people who are out there, like the nurses, the doctors, the first responders, the volunteers that are taking food to the elderly who are shut-ins. There's so many ways that people are creatively approaching this. I was listening to public radio the other day, and there was a call in, how are you responding to this crisis? What are you doing to help you? And this one woman said, well, I've been sitting around feeling sorry for myself for days and having a pity party. And she said, and then I realized, I don't want to do this anymore. What can I do? This is awful. I'll go crazy if I keep doing this. And this idea just popped into my head. I don't even know my neighbors. I could set up a Facebook page for my street. So she got busy on the computer and she set up a Facebook chat room for all of the neighbors, and she put on 3x5 cards the chat room and how to access it, and she put it in everybody's mailbox on the street. She knew none of her neighbors, by the way. She lived there for 5 years, didn't know any of them. Just like most people, they don't know their neighbors. And she also put on the bottom of the card, let's start a ritual. Every day at 6 o'clock, come out of your house and stand on your stoop on the end of your sidewalk and let's wave at each other. And she said, I don't know if it helped anyone else, but I had immediately quit being depressed. I immediately got out of my misery and my pity party, and I felt so good. And then I realized, God, when this is over, I'll know my neighbors. and it was so contagious because it affected the neighbors so positively. So, and her story affected me just hearing it, and all the other thousands of people on the radio listening to it. It gave them ideas of what they could do. And so that's what we have built into us, is this extraordinary capacity to see through the rubble to the way out, the way through this. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what's going to happen. I know we should listen to the experts. I've been washing my hands like I've never done in my entire life, very dutifully every time I need to, or touch a doorknob. Lots of my behavior has changed, but I still don't know. I don't know if we're going to have this conference in the fall. That's an unknown. And all of you, none of you really know. We don't know, but we do know and we can rely on that. Nobody can take away our resilience or our mental health. No virus has that power. No earthquake has that power. No 9/11 has that power. Only we have the power to give away that precious birthright. And only we have the power to take it back. And once we understand that all we're really ever up against, in a sense, is our innocent misuse of thought and our unawareness that we're doing it. And that's not a problem either, because once you're aware of it, you can't be aware of it until you're aware of it. And once you're aware of it, there's no point in beating yourself up, because then you're going to be going back down. But if you're aware of it and you're grateful that you're aware of it, it frees you. It lifts your spirits. It restores, reboots your resilience, your mental well-being. Any other questions or comments? Any stories that people have that they want to share?
Grace has raised a hand, Joe. So, Grace, can you unmute yourself? Are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you so
hi.
much, Chris.
Great.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Your name is Gray?
Joe. Yeah, I'm here in Italy.
Oh, wow.
My name is yeah, I'm here in Italy on day 15 of the lockdown. And yeah, I'm, thanks to the principals, experiencing this in a very grounded, calm and easy, graceful way. My question is around slowing down from within, Joe, because it looks to me like my clients are coming to me extremely revved up and speeded up about the current scenario and what this is going to mean financially and what this is going to mean about the future. And sometimes I have a bit of a hard time kind of, I suppose, communicating the absolute value of what you've just explained, of us settling down first and slowing down the insecure thinking before making decisions. And so I just wanted to have your input or feedback on what you see about that, because the people coming to me are kind of just really caught in that insecurity, and that I need to make a decision now. I need to fix everything now. And I kind of feel a little bit airy-fairy sometimes, saying, well, hold on a minute, we need to come over here and slow down from within, really. Everybody thinks they're on a collective retreat right now, which is kind of true. We're all locked down. But there's a big difference being on retreat and actually a quiet mind. So I'd just love to hear your input in this area, Joe.
Well, I guess what I don't really know how to slow down the mind. You'd think that guy who's written several books about slowing down at the speed of life in the mind would certainly be able to answer that question. I don't know how to get in there and stop the cogwheels from going around. But that's not really my job, is how I would answer that. My job isn't to slow down my mind. My only, and it's not really a thing I have to do, it's just that the more I understand the absolute truth, the fact that all I can ever experience is my thought about whatever I'm thinking about. And when I have that awareness, it doesn't mean my thoughts are going to change right away, but having that awareness, that consciousness, puts me what I would call on more solid ground, more stabilizing ground. So it's like a spinning top. It's going around and around and around and around. If you keep twirling it, it's going to keep spinning. But if you let it run itself out, it will die out and topple over. So this morning when I woke up and I had you guys in mind, my mind was just, I woke up and I had kind of this, a lot of adrenaline in my chest. I could feel my heart rate, and I could, and before I give a talk, I usually have a lot of energy. I used to think of that as fear. I now see it as I'm getting the adrenaline like a runner before a race. It's just really moving me. And so I was just not trying to slow it down or control it, but just I was aware of it. And in being aware of it, I started getting these extraordinary, beautiful thoughts coming into my mind about, what might come to my mind to share today. What's really important. And it was just kind of like a weaver weaving all morning. There was just things would naturally come into my mind. And that feeling of angst, or it just settled down little by little, like the top slowly unspinning. My being aware of it and not judging it and understanding it allowed it to do what it was there to do, which was to energize and inspire me for this talk. So helping people to first of all, kind of the first step, is it Gray that you call yourself? Was it Gray?
Grace. Yeah, you can say Grace.
Grace. The first thing you have to help people see, and they see that by your own presence, by your example more than any way, is the power of not knowing and not having to know the answer. That's where the answers come from. It's not in trying to figure it out that gets you clarity. It's in letting it go that it's like this in my book, Slowing Down the Speed of Love, I use the metaphor of silt in the pond. If you have something really valuable that you throw in the pond, if you jump in the pond and try to find it, you stir up the silt and you can't find it. But if you sit on the edge of the pond and you let the silt settle, you see where it is and you can walk gently in and take it. And it's like that with insight. It's like that with direction. And a lot of that is just really listening to people, being with them, not judging them, and just kind of gently showing them through your example and your response to them. If you frantically try to stop their franticness, it's not going to help them, right?
Yeah.
But if you're being really with them and understanding and not judging what they're feeling, they feel understood by you. They feel a connection. And then they can maybe be able to listen to some direction or information from you that might help them. But first you have to meet them where they are. It's so important. And then it's, this is it's not something you can teach people. You're more like a guide in the wilderness. You can't paddle the canoe for them. You can show them how to do it. You can show them how to use the map and the compass, but when they're out there, they're on their own, and they have to learn by trial and error, by falling out of the canoe or getting lost and finding their way back. And in those experiences, they learn. So, my heart goes out to Italy, and you guys are on the first leg of this, in a sense, the Chinese first and South Koreans, but it's hit Italy so strongly. And so, it's understandable that you have a lot of people in that state, and all you can really do is love them out of it.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I don't know how to get them to stop their thinking either.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, very helpful, Joe. Thank you so much. Thanks for sending out this webinar today as well.
Well, keep up the good work, and I'm sure you're helping lots of people, Grace.
Thank you.
Jill, Molly has a question. Molly, are you able to unmute yourself? Yeah, cool.
Hi. Hey, Joe.
Hi, Molly.
How are you?
I'm good. I can't see you, so I'm not sure who it is.
No, it's Molly Malone. You know me from a long time ago.
Oh, hi, Molly Malone. I know who you are.
I loved what you were saying to Grace there. Hi, Grace. And I just thought how a week and a half ago I went to the grocery store, and it was the first time that I'd been there since it got scary. And I could feel, all these people scurrying around, and there was really a feeling of fear in the air. And I could feel it in my body like electricity. And it was just a heightened state, kind of in the collective, And at the same time, as I tuned into the feeling, it was all kinds of interesting stuff. There was also such a heightened sense, and there was also this big feeling of connectivity with everybody and love. And I was wearing this ridiculous hat that looks like some Russian fur thing, and this lady in one aisle, she's like, "I love your hat." And I turned to her, and she has beautiful red hair. I said, "I love your hair." And we were just strangers, just loving each other immediately. And I realized that my body didn't mind the fear. I mean, it was in a way enjoying it. And I've spent most of my life trying to get rid of the fear and the anxiety. And I think from being in the principles so long, and I would listen to Sid Banks, and he would say, look for a feeling. And I misinterpreted it as like, look for the good feeling, not the one you're in. You got to get rid of the one you're in. And I still do that. But from what you're saying today, I'm realizing, no, I don't know how to turn off the fear, or grief, or it's like, and that's not even the point. It's more like I can feel all these feelings and not fight with them or push them away. There's a certain beauty to all of it. So that's what I wanted to say. If you have comments, it'd be great.
I just think it's lovely to be a human being with the whole rainbow of emotion.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes of Sid is, if human beings were simply not afraid of their own experience, their own feelings, that alone would transform the world. It's when we're afraid of our psychological experience, when we judge it, when we try to run away from it, when we try to analyze it, when we do too much with it, instead of just embracing and accepting our humanity. There's something transformational in accepting what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And also knowing where the feeling is coming from. And that doesn't mean to judge yourself, because I know I'm creating the thoughts that are creating the feeling. But accepting, like this morning, when I just accepted what I was feeling, and I wasn't afraid of feeling that. Earlier in my career as a public speaker, when I get that pit in the stomach before a talk, some of you do public speaking, I would get terrified. Oh my God, what if I get up there and I throw up? Or what if I get up there and I don't remember what I'm going to say? Or what if I get up there and I go blank? Or, oh God, I was afraid of that feeling. And I don't remember who told me this or how I came to it, but I just remember at some point not seeing that feeling as anything to judge or feel bad about, but to just accept it. And whenever I accepted it, it transformed it. And it did it again for me today.
Yeah.
And it does it for me every day. And it's like a kid that's crying. If you tell them to shut up, it makes it worse. But if you just hold them and accept them, pretty soon they're playing and laughing and
Yeah.
go away. Feelings just need your awareness and your acceptance, not your
Yeah.
analysis.
I think I was working so hard to try to figure out how to move my feelings, or even like feel my feelings as if it was a doing thing,
Yeah.
or to release my feelings. And it's just way too much effort. And what I heard you say is like, you don't have to know how. It's just an accepting.
It's not our job.
Yeah.
Uh, our job is to just observe,
Yeah.
to be aware. And the deeper intelligence of mind or spiritual wisdom takes care, it's all taken care of. My friend Val de Monroe says the principles do all the heavy lifting.
Hmm.
We don't have to do anything. We can't even try to be aware. I mean, if you, it's like trying to surprise yourself by jumping in front of a mirror.
Hmm.
You know you're jumping in front of the mirror. You're not going to scare yourself with your own image. It's just not possible. Any other comments or questions? Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.
Joe, we are just coming to our last few minutes. It's just after 5:02. So I'm thinking, unless there are any absolutely burning questions, you might like to just. I just want to give you this time in case you have any closing remarks or anything that's occurred to you through the call.
Well, I guess, yeah, thank you, Christian. I guess what I'd like to leave you guys with are just a couple of key points. And one is that fear has a purpose. When, fear is a label we put on the sensation of a lot of adrenaline going through our system and heightened blood pressure and pulse rate and dilation of the pupils, and we call that fear, but it's in service of our survival. And we can create that. That is an automatic response to survive. So fear is not a bad thing. Fear is a very helpful survival mechanism. But we can over analyze any situation. And when we misuse the power of thought, we can create unnecessary illusionary fear that has no basis whatsoever in reality. It's all made up. And most of our fears are imagination. The acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. So when you think something, thought is so powerful. It creates a holographic image in your mind that turns into sensory perceptual experience that validates the thought you had. It all happens in an instant. So when you can realize that most of what you fear will never happen, and you can stay grounded in this moment, in this reality that you are in this moment, you will enter a state of mental health, resilience, and calm. And from that state, you will get your best thinking, your best insights, your best direction for what's the next step with your physical health, with your safety, with your finances, with your career, with whatever it is that is coming up for you in your life at this point. And the deeper that you realize that that's something you can absolutely trust and know that that is your true essence, that you are enough. You are absolutely enough. Life will never give you more than you can handle. That's an old saying. Life will never give you more than you can handle. When you really know that, you can walk through this life with less fear, more ease, and more wisdom. And so that's, really the only thing we have to fear is, as FDR said long ago, as we faced the depression, the worst part of the depression in this country, a worldwide depression, he said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. So that's a powerful statement if you really understand that, because fear is what blinds us. Fear is what creates violence. Fear is what judges. Fear is what narrows our vision of what's possible. Fear is what confines us to our huddling in our bed, scared to death, instead of opening our hearts and seeing how we can serve. So living from our true essence, that fearless state, is exactly what the doctor ordered for this time that we face. We all need to unearth, reawaken the depth of our beauty, the depth of our wisdom, the depth of our being, because we have everything we need to not only survive this crisis that we're in, but to come out the other side. And we will come out the other side, and we can come out of it wiser, more grateful, more united, more generous than we went into this. This is a self-correcting opportunity. This is a wake-up call. So wake up. Time to wake up. Thank you.
Oh, Joe, thank you. Wonderful. A great place to leave it. Thank you so much for today, and thank you everybody for being here.